Welcome to what is more than likely your first video that you are ever probably watching on this channel. My name is Mr. Lamb. I am your biology teacher, and this is the first video lecture that you are going to encounter this year. I'm very excited. These are all brand new videos for the 2018 school year. We're really excited to just kind of dive right in and get into some introduction to biology and properties of life. Now, I will explain a few of the procedures and things that will take place within these videos over the course of the school year. So make sure you're paying attention, make sure you've got your note sheet handy, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. So a couple of objectives for our lesson. By the end of this video, you should be able to understand underlying themes to biology. Biology is a broad science, and so we're going to dive into some real specific themes over the course of the school year. And then we're also going to examine and evaluate properties of life to be able to determine if something is living or if something is non-living. I know that might seem fairly simple and straightforward, but there is some gray area in terms of what is considered something that is living and something that is non-living. Quite a lot of vocabulary in this particular unit here. A lot of these you've probably already heard of before, but we'll dive into those as we continue through the lesson today. So before we even dive into anything about biology, we really need to understand what biology is. And biology is simply the study of life. It is the study of all living things that exist on Earth. That includes things like the environment, the places in which organisms live. It includes all living organisms from big to small. It includes the chemistry of life as well. There's a lot of chemistry that is involved in biology. Cells, the most fundamental unit of life, will be taking quite a deep look into cells. And evolution, which is how life changes over time. Life is very diverse. There's a lot of different forms of life that are present on Earth, and everything in every place that houses life is considered the biosphere. So really, if you break that word down, bio, the root bio means life, and sphere, is a three-dimensional circle, kind of like a ball. So biosphere essentially refers to the Earth, right? It is the life sphere. Makes sense, right? And then the variety of organisms in an area is known as biodiversity. Diversity refers to the differences in between all types of life, and bio just refers to life itself. So certain areas of the world have higher biodiversity than others. If you think about the number of different types of organisms that live there. So for example, if you think about the Arctic way up north, biodiversity would be rather low because there are not very many living organisms in that location. As we head south closer to the equator, where it is warm and moist, you're typically going to find higher levels of biodiversity simply because there are more organisms that prefer a warm and moist climate to one that is dry and cold. So biodiversity, very, very important for the stability of life as well. So when we look at specific properties of life, all living things share similar characteristics. And different biology books and different textbooks will say different things, but there are essentially 8 properties of life that all organisms must possess. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule. And we'll talk more about those as we get towards the end. But these are the 8 basic things that something needs to have in order to be considered living. So the first and foremost, everything needs to be made of cells. All organisms are made of the smallest unit of life. The smallest unit of life being the cell. Multicellular means that you have more than one cell. And unicellular means that you're just simply made of one cell. The word multi means many, like if you get a multi-pack of fruit snacks, you have more than one thing in the box. So multi means more than one. And unicellular, that root uni, simply means one, like a unicycle or a unibrow, something along those lines. So all living things have to be made of cells. So what I want you to do now, this is the first question that I'm actually going to have you answer in your notes and on your quiz today, is I want you to name one organism that is considered multicellular, and then another organism that is considered unicellular. So go ahead and write those down, and we'll move on here in just a second. The second property of life is that all living things need energy in some way, shape, or form. So either an organism has to ingest food, by eating, or it has to create food. For example, through the plants, through the process of photosynthesis. All of those chemical processes that use your energy are part of your metabolism. So you probably heard the term like, oh, he's got high metabolism or something like that. Well, metabolism just refers to how your body utilizes the energy that it takes in. So we utilize our energy through movement. We use our energy simply through actually just sitting here because we're breathing, we're digesting, our heart is pumping and moving blood throughout our body. So our body needs energy and utilizes it, some more efficiently than others, but that is your metabolism, all those chemical processes that are occurring inside of your body right now. And we'll look more into those when we take a look at our biochemistry unit. An organism has to be able to respond to the environment. Classic example of this is if you're in a classroom and a quiet classroom taking a test, somebody drops a heavy book on the floor, boom, you hear that loud noise. That is known as the stimulus. The response is when you jump out of your seat or pee your pants or whatever. So the stimulus is the cause. That's what causes the response. It's kind of like a cause-effect relationship in English. So an example of this is on the right here. You see this plant, and the plant is actually growing towards the light. Now that process is known as phototropism. Basically, plants grow towards the light. The stimulus is the sun. The plant needs sun in order to be able to make energy for it to survive. Well, the plant is going to respond by growing towards the light in order to obtain more energy. So that is an example of a stimulus and a response. We'll practice more with this a little bit later on. Okay, so organisms have to be able to make copies of themselves, and this process is called reproduction. There are two real main types of reproduction. There is asexual reproduction, which just involves one parent, and the genetics of that offspring that are produced from that parent are exactly the same. So baby is genetically identical to parent in this particular type of reproduction. Sexual reproduction requires two parents. And the genetics are different because half of your DNA comes from mom and half comes from dad. An example of this is a wonderful hydra that's over here on the right, and the process in which this is undergoing is asexual reproduction. And what's kind of weird, because it's kind of growing off of the side here, that is known as budding. And so this bud actually will fall off and be its own living organism. I think that's always seems really crazy to me, because I always think about what if humans did that? Like a little baby just grows off the side of you, and when it's ready, it just falls to the ground, and ta-da! Congratulations, your mom or your dad. Crazy, right? All living organisms have a genetic code called DNA. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Some have something that's called RNA, which we'll talk about later on. But DNA essentially stores the code for who you are, not just the fact that you have brown eyes or black hair or anything like that, but it also stores the code for you being human. It stores a lot of genetic information that is important because that produces proteins inside of your body. So again, this is passed on from parents to offspring, and like I said, it codes for all the characteristics inside of an organism. So every living organism on this planet has to have some form of a genetic code. Life is very well organized as well, and that's what we look at when we talk about biological organization. Now, looking at the image on the right, we start off with small molecules to large molecules, and then cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and organisms. Well, what I want you to keep in mind here is that the cell is the smallest unit of life. If you go smaller than a cell, it is not considered a living thing. So the smallest unit of life is the cell. Now, we get a bunch of similar cells together, we get a tissue. Okay, so for example, in the picture you've got cardiac or heart tissue. That is a tissue that is made up of a bunch of heart cells. And then a bunch of tissues together makes up an organ, and the organ here would be the heart. And you get a bunch of organs together, you get organ systems, and since it's the heart, it's known as the cardiovascular system. And then you get all of the organ systems together, and that creates one whole organism. So just keep in mind, like I said, cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, organs make up organ systems, and organ systems make up organisms. Right? Very, very specific levels of organization. Organisms have to be able to maintain homeostasis. They have to maintain a stable internal environment. This is run through what's called a feedback mechanism, but what's important to keep in mind is that our internal body is very well regulated. So think about it. If you get too hot when you exercise, your body starts to sweat, right? If you're too cold, you start to shiver, and that helps generate body heat. So your body does a really good job of maintaining that internal environment. Keep in mind that species adapt and evolve over time as well. Life continually changes. And that's what the concept of evolution is. It's a change in living things over time. Now, individual organisms cannot evolve. Okay? If I'm pushed off a ledge, I can't just sprout wings and fly away. That's not evolution by any means. Evolution is about a change in the species as a whole. It's about a large-scale change, and typically it's due to some type of advantage that's produced by a certain trait, and then what we see over time is that that trait occurs more frequently because it provides an advantage in the environment, and that is known as an adaptation. That's that inherited trait that provides the advantage. So it could be color, it could be whether it's tall or short. It's a variety of different factors. Anything can provide an advantage. But again, a lot of times what it has to deal with is what takes place in the environment. So this will be the second question here I want you to write down, and that question is going to be, what is one thing you thought might have been a property of life, but actually isn't? So maybe you thought that all living things had to have skin. Okay. Clearly that's not a property of life. We've gone over the 8. So go ahead and jot that down because you're going to be needing that in your Google form here in just a little bit. So in summary, biology simply is the study of life. Right? And there are 8 properties of living things. In order to be considered living, you must have all 8 of these. Made of cells, evolves and adapts, maintains homeostasis, has a genetic code, it must display organization, reproduces, responds to the environment, and uses energy. Now again, there are some exceptions to these rules. So for example, let's say a woman gets ovarian cancer and has to have her ovaries removed. Well, ovaries are one of the main reproductive organs of a female. So because she could no longer reproduce, is she still considered living? So that's something you need to think about. It's not so much about the individual, but it is about the species itself. So think about that as we approach some problems about things that may be considered living and things that may be considered non-living. So again, these are the objectives. Hopefully we met these objectives for you today. Like I said, this is the first in the series of videos that you're going to have, so I'm looking forward to having you in class. Hopefully you obtained some information from this video. You've got your notes written down, and when we come back to class next time, we'll go through some of that and start working on some activities to help further your understanding. Again, my name is Mr. Lamb, and I hope you have a fantastic day. See you later.